Hello to everybody and welcome to the 2022 Virtual Summer School Pipeline to Promotion. We're excited that you've joined us today. Again, I'm Diane Mashburn, Extension Instructor with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Virtual Summer School is co-hosted annually by the Southern Region Program Leaders Network Program and Staff Development Committee and the National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals. Thank you to everybody who has contributed to planning this important and timely series. Today's session is a panel discussion on onboarding for today's extension. So we have three panelists and a panel facilitator with us today. As our panel facilitator, we have Cheryl Newberry. Cheryl serves as the Program and Personnel Development Specialist with Oklahoma State University Extension. She has 22 years extension experience in Texas, serving as an FCS 4-H educator and a 4-H specialist. She joined the team in Oklahoma in 2011 as a district 4-H program specialist and has been in her current role for 3 years. Our panelists today are Amanda Riz from Ohio State Extension, Dr. Christy Farner from UGA Extension, and Dr. Tierney Woodruff from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So Amanda has been a program specialist in professional development and training for Ohio State University Extension for the past 7 years. In this role, she works on new employee onboarding efforts, co-leads the organization's mentoring program, and organizes a variety of other professional development opportunities for extension staff. Christy is the Staff and Organizational Development Specialist for Extension in the Office of Learning and Organizational Development at the University of Georgia. She has worked in the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences for over 15 years. Dr. Farner oversees all internal professional development, including but not limited to onboarding, mentorship, and ongoing professional development. She provides facilitation for organizational processes related to the county delivery system and chairs the biannual internal extension conference. Tierney is an assistant professor and extension specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. She currently leads employee development efforts for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension and has led staff development efforts within higher education and K-12 educational environments as well. She earned her master's degree in curriculum and instruction in 2008 and her doctorate of philosophy in educational administration in 2019, both from Texas A&M University. And also we have Dr. Julie Robinson from the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture, serving as a facilitator to help us today with our text questions. So with that, I will pass things over to Cheryl to kick off today's panel.
Thank you, Diane, for those introductions, and we look forward to sharing with you all today. So before we get started with the first question, I wanted to just say that all of us are immensely aware that onboarding is a very important foundational piece for extension success. Onboarding can mean the difference between an employee being successful and us keeping them in extension to us losing them to other organizations because they didn't feel they had adequate training and support, which we see sometimes in our programs. That first year in extension is very critical to developing that firm foundation for them, helping them build relationships with other colleagues and within their county, helping them to know where to find resources to help them do their job, and just to provide support to them in general so that they know who to call and where to go as they begin to build their extension program from the ground up as a new employee. And so today I'm excited to discuss this topic of onboarding with these three lovely ladies who bring very different perspectives in how their states do onboarding in their states from Georgia, Ohio, and Texas. And so with that, let's get the conversation started. So the first question that I would pose to our panelists, and we'll start with Amanda and then Christy and then Tierney. So you can just pick up and go right on as one finishes. So tell us a little bit about a brief overview of your onboarding program in your state and how long has that particular program been in place?
Yeah, so in Ohio, we have the One Extension onboarding program. So it's Onboard Network Excel, and we have had that in existence since 2020. Our state didn't really have anything formalized or consistent across the counties to onboard staff. So we rolled that out, and it was a series of 6 and then turned into 8 virtual lessons. So it was held weekly. We would do the lessons twice a year. And so whenever folks started, they would hopefully get it within their first 6 months. They would go through the cohort together. And at that time, they were all live lessons. So the first session was all day long virtually, and we have adapted and made so many changes with each iteration that we've done since 2020. Our process is kind of ever evolving, but that was kind of our first iteration. And our most recent cohort, we had asynchronous modules and we had live sessions. And we are currently down to 6 total weekly lessons at this point. So that's kind of where we stand right now and where we came from with our formalized process since 2020.
And at the University of Georgia, we have, it's been at least 20 years that we have had onboarding in a variety of formal processes. It started with one onboarding training and now 4 agents, and now we are up to 4 core lessons, multi-day sessions that happen for agents. And then each program area has an additional 3 hands-on sessions in addition to that. And we have a mentor program for our agents. So they are assigned 2 mentors. One is focusing more on relationships, one is more focusing on programs along the way, in addition to our district level orientations. That is our main training is for our extension agents. We have about roughly 33 new agents a year. Of course, that fluctuates some with hiring freezes and COVID and different things, but on average, we do have an educator role that is staff that is comes to some of the trainings that we do as well. And then all of our employees have some asynchronous trainings with an introduction to extension. If you have anything to do with cash, kids, or keys, we have policies, procedures, and protocols, asynchronous training, and a few others, depending on their role in the organization. We have a once a year, 2-day specialist training as well. And that's the majority of our onboarding.
So at Texas A&M, I have been in this role for about a year, but we've had a strong onboarding process for quite a bit of time. And we have large numbers of employees coming through, especially with COVID, and a lot of turnover that I think COVID brought on as well. And so when I got to start, we got to really reevaluate a lot of things. And so for me, I find often organizations really consider what employees need to know and forms that need to be filled out and other sort of organization focused boxes that need to be checked. And so when we were looking at this, we really wanted to make sure, especially coming out of the pandemic, that we weren't leaving the employee experience out of the equation, and that we were refocusing on that. But doing that is really challenging when you're coordinating onboarding orientation and you have constant stream of new hires. It felt like whack-a-mole. And so we really adopted a new onboarding approach that incorporates a standard start date for all of our new agent hires, and another concept we call Make Day One Great. The standard start date really allows us to move our orientation and onboarding strategy from one of whack-a-mole to much more consistent, intentional, and efficient. And that Make Day One Great concept is really where an employee's career, the agency, begins at the state office at orientation day one. And this really allows our agency to pool our resources together to provide a consistent, positive, and motivational welcome that also really focuses on developing that sense of belonging, connection to agency culture. We know that subconsciously or consciously, our employees are making decisions about whether they're going to stay with their organization within that first week or so of employment. That window is very important. And we recognize during that window, that first week, right? Some units had processes that made that first week incredible. Employees felt like they mattered. They felt like they had the resources they needed. They felt like they belonged. They felt needed and known. But other units, that wasn't their strength, and they didn't have the capacity to do that. So they were really being oriented also by county officials or 4-H parents. And we were also seeing agents who weren't getting orientation till 30 to 90 days in the job, when that's a little bit late, right? They were coming with a different sort of learning mentality to that orientation. I really equate that to asking a new college student to show up on campus and take a few months of classwork, and then we're going to give you an orientation, then we're going to give you the syllabus. We're asking them to then be frustrated and fail. And so we really looked at with this orientation to build retention throughout, and focusing employee experience at the center. And so when we control that experience and first impressions right away, we really got to focus on what the employee needed, not just what the agency wanted to make sure they knew. So we got to address issues of belonging, mattering, value alignment, motivation. Those are very key components of our orientation. We really look at the 4 S's of transition, right? Situation, self, social support, and strategies. And we recognize that they weren't going to have the ability to learn or drink from the fire hose, which people think is just sort of an assumption or an accepted practice in orientation, unless we address their urgent concerns first. So we really paced out our onboarding to even be that cohort experience right from the beginning, discussion group leaders, other sorts of connections they were making, workshops, content training that we got to pace out. And throughout that, we're really incorporating those 4 sets of factors, those 4 S's that really influence their ability to thrive in their transition, both before, after, and during. And the standardization for us is really what allowed that to be intentional and individualized, because we could be efficient and we could be effective, and we could, address some of the other stuff because this process was efficient. And so we really looked at doing a real focus on morale and creating that cohort experience beyond that onboarding period, and really making sure that our learning is scaffolded and intentional, and prioritizing what the employee also needs, not just what we're checking a box on. But then we do have those boxes to check, right? We are making sure it's consistent across the board, that we have agendas, that we have the content that they need. And so those were things that were already in place. And so that's where we're trying to take it, is not just the boxes to be checked, but also what does that employee need? But we have all the same things that y'all described as well. We have connections workshops that continue that first 8 weeks. We have a first step program, a mentoring program. We'll be launching a peer and coaching program. And so we're really trying to look at all those different aspects in that orientation and onboarding experience.
So let's dig a little deeper into more of the content of your onboarding processes. So are you incorporating competency building topics as well as subject matter expertise in your onboarding program? Tell us a little bit more about that. Let's start with Christy.
Yes, we are tracking competencies, and we're also looking at whether we are, as we're looking at the different competencies, are we doing the first step of just awareness? Are we adding knowledge or practice? And so we kind of track that through our different trainings, as well as looking at if it's compliance, connection, clarification, or culture that the competencies are connecting to. So 4 C's of onboarding. And we have the program specific trainings. So we're looking at the technical expertise that we're building in our agents. And each program area has 3 different ones that our new agents would go to during their first year. And then we've got our foundations training, our first training that is an overview of organizational structure, policies, helping them to gel as a cohort. And then we have a foundations 2, which is that program planning cycle, has needs assessment through evaluation of the program planning process. We have a foundations of communication in between those 2, along with a basics of youth development that every new agent gets, because no matter what program area you're in, you're going to have to interact with youth and with 4-H.
Tierney.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that Christy shared, we think it's just incredibly important for a number of reasons. From a retention standpoint, from a supervisory perspective, from a generational perspective, it's absolutely vital to incorporate that. When we ask supervisors what they wish their employee knew or is absolutely vital to do their job, but they've seen gaps in the past, that's a key area, whether it's communication, conflict, engaging with diverse audiences, time management. And so to omit those things in our onboarding process would be, I think, a significant omission on our part. And so we really work to incorporate that into our orientation, workshop sessions, onboarding agendas, and professional development as a whole. We also are looking and excited to incorporate that into our coaching program so that individual employees can reach out to build a competency in an area that they see lacking, or also they can have a supervisor recommend connecting with a coach to work on a specific area of need that they see.
And yeah, similarly to what the other two shared, we have our competency building that's in our onboarding for all staff. So everyone, program staff in the county goes through this. And we have sort of an onboarding checklist that will take them through the, things that they need to do. And those bigger, more important pieces, that's those supervisor identified pieces that we really wanted them to grow in and work on. We have a really heavy application portion, whether it's a live session, whether it's an asynchronous module, so they can really get some hands-on skills to practice those. And our content area specific trainings is more led by the program area. So if they're family consumer sciences, agriculture, natural resources, 4-H, they kind of all have their own thing, which will tie in together. But we also have, a track for support staff, but a lot of those topics came from a supervisor evaluation at the very beginning of the program, where the big question is what is absolutely essential and when do they need that content? So if it's something that's definitely more important, day one, week one, we put it in this onboarding checklist where they can manually go through and know where to find those resources in the immediate future. And then those bigger pieces that they need to really practice is sort of more longer term and further out into the program.
Yeah, we're similar here in Oklahoma as well, that we incorporate the competency training kind of coordinated in my office with the admin team. And then the program leaders work with other specialists and even educators to help develop the subject matter expertise training as a part of our onboarding program. And the other thing that we've done with our biennial conference for all extension professional employees is the workshops were focused on those core competencies and not focused on subject matter expertise, because we typically see a lot of subject matter expertise training throughout the year, but not so much in those competency areas. And so we focused on those during our biennial conference the last 2 times in 20 and 22. And that has been fairly well received. So we'll see how that goes in the future, but that's a little bit about us. So Christy alluded to the fact that they have a 2-day training for specialists as a part of their onboarding program already. Could you all elaborate a little bit more on, are there other groups like support staff or specialists at the out in the away from campus and then on campus that you are coordinating training for onboarding?
Our main focus is our agents and specialists and all of our educators. In addition to the face-to-face and asynchronous trainings that we do, we also do a welcome packet. So on their first day in the office, they'll have a Padfolio, a name tag, name tent, or not name tent, you know what I mean? A plaque, whatever, that has their name on it.
Yes, plate.
Thank you. I was real close, but not quite there. And then a few other things. So a jump drive or a pen, or we have a personalized letter from our director of extension welcoming them, a lapel pin, So a couple other things that they might not have their computer on the first day, but they will have a nice packet of information and a snapshot of extension to help them feel welcomed, as Tierney was talking about how important that is on that first day and that first week to have that sense of belonging. For our specialist training, we rotate it between our 3 campuses that we have extension. But other than that, our other trainings for other roles are asynchronous. For our agents, it's about 12 to 18 months because we do have rolling hires, unlike with Texas. And so it may take 12 or it could take up to 18 months, depending on your start date of when you get through all of our in-person and asynchronous trainings. So I don't know if that exactly answered, but we, our program leader for A&R runs our specialist training, and I support that as needed. And so we look at organizational structure things that they need to know along the way.
Yes, so we also do a specialist and agent focus. And then we also incorporate our program coordinators into that first day where they can kind of get that big sort of picture of it. And we try to, really look at how do we sort of facilitate different people coming in, having breakout sessions for our specialists when it's more agent focused and agent centric. And then we do another sort of a 2-day training just for specialists. But when it comes to the support staff and the county directors, that's something that for me is really, really important, and I want to see incorporated. So currently those are being onboarded really more by their administrative lead, whoever that is. But I want to see that incorporated soon, because really and truly, when we look at agencies, people often stay or leave in a role based on their manager, that experience. And so really looking at that leadership and capacity building of managers as they're coming into the role and beyond that, preparing them beforehand, I think it's one of the most effective ways to really strengthen the agency and directly affect retention. But oftentimes we are just simply finding someone who is an exemplary individual contributor and then expect them to suddenly lead people without surrounding them with the same support and resources that anyone needs in a new role. And a supervisor may really be able to onboard them really well, but it's all about what is their capacity and their strengths. Are they really able to do that? And I know most supervisors already have really full plates to do that well. And so, and when it comes to support staff, and I would say even county support staff, any of those, anybody who's really affiliated with our brand, our agency, we want them to know why we're doing this, what we're doing, what is our mission, vision. So even if it's a smaller orientation, and virtual, it doesn't have to be in person. Those are things that I think are so important to build, again, that feeling of belonging and what they are working for matters. And when it comes to that support staff, they are a linchpin in really making things work. And so really figuring out ways that we can do that, I think is super important to retain and not have that brain drain of that, county support staff or that, office manager who knew everything, right? She knew why the office worked in the way she did, leaving because they didn't feel that sense of belonging to our organization. And we want to keep those individuals. And I think that that's a key way that we can address that.
Yeah, so our first iteration in Ohio of our One Extension onboarding program was geared solely towards educators in the county. We just needed to get something out there to them. So we started with that. And in 2021, we opened it up to specialists and support staff. We rolled out our mentoring program in 2021 as well. And we wanted that to be fully inclusive of every individual in the entire organization, whether they were a program assistant, a specialist, SNAP Ed program assistant, educator, anything. So we decided to open up our onboarding the same time as we opened up our mentoring program, just to make it more inclusive and provide everyone with that additional assistance. Now, it definitely made, adapting our content a lot trickier to try and make it as relevant to every single position. However, we really try to do a good job on making sure everyone can apply that content in their own situation. So the training we do is more general, but when it comes time for that application, we really want to make sure that they can see it in their own lives. Whether you're a support staff, how are you reaching out to community members? How are you being approached in the office? Whether you're a SNAP Ed program assistant, what is your elevator pitch? How does this look for you in your own situation in your own county? So we really wanted to try and open it up, make it inclusive. And we know that it's still, mostly content geared towards educators, but we really wanted to open it up too, just to get everyone socially connected in the organization. So that's another thing to kind of make them feel like they're a good fit in the organization, is just being socially connected with their peers. So it gives them another way to kind of get other people in their network. You're muted, Cheryl.
How did that happen? I didn't hear any of you mention onboarding or specific training for like county supervisors. We call them county extension directors, or other mid-management positions. What about that? Does anybody have any onboarding for that particular audience?
We do at the University of Georgia. We have 2 trainings, one in the fall, one in the spring, for our new county coordinators. And that could be you are new in extension as an agent and you're the new county coordinator, or you might have been around for a while and you're just now taking on the leadership role in your county. And so one is more based on working around people, and the other one is more focused on systems, and it doesn't matter what order you take those in. We've also been broadening the group of people who can take those as people who might become a county coordinator in the next 6 months. We got feedback that some people were wishing that they had some of that training prior to actually starting as the county coordinator. So by broadening that up, we're giving people who might end up, or they know for sure that, somebody's retiring and it's already been decided. And so that has helped people to feel more prepared as they take on that role.
Either of the other of you?
Yeah, so our existing supervisors went through sort of an separate supervisor training. It was kind of like hired out by someone else to do. And our learning and org development unit is currently in the process of putting together a new supervisor training for extension leaders. So it will be open to all supervisors, all future supervisors, all aspiring supervisors, because Christy, we had the same thought. We didn't want to, limit people on this content. So currently we have them just go through the one extension onboarding program. But with the new supervisor training, we'll have that as a piece of it. We'll have our new mentor training that they'll go through. And then we're also going to add in, all the supervisor specific policies and procedures, all the, really specific content for them. So that's in the works right now.
And I will say it's connected, but not exactly the onboarding. But on Friday's webinar, Rochelle Sapp from my office will be talking about our district director shadowing program. And that's kind of a way of onboarding. It's like pre-onboarding, I guess, but connected to what we're talking about. Sorry, Tierney, didn't mean to jump.
No, I was going to say that these are things that I think are important, that I'm trying to get the buy-in, to really launch, because we see the gaps. Because right now all it is our administrators are doing that onboarding, and they do, a one-day training maybe for our new office managers, support staff, or things like that, but they're facilitating that. And it looks more to me to be more job specific, and not necessarily always the competency building and building capacity, and really preparing people for way before and then kind of after as well. So that's something that we're looking to develop and get buy-in for.
We're similar here in Oklahoma. We do county extension director training for new people. This past April was the last one we did, and we had some folks come who were thinking about taking on that role, but weren't 100% sure they were willing to do that. So Christy, I agree with you. I think that's an important feature. With our support staff training, we do a conference for them every other year, and they do, but it's not onboarding. And then each district does a conference in the fall on the off years. Onboarding is typically handled through the county extension office with their CED or the district administrative support specialist at the district level does onboarding with new support staff. And that's pretty consistent across our state, but certainly could be something we could continue to work on here as well. So let's move on to another question about who is delivering the content in your onboarding program? Are you all, as coordinators, delivering all the content, or are you utilizing other folks in other areas? Let's start with Tierney.
Sure. So it's a little bit of both, but mainly I focus on, we used a nomination process to identify really who were the most exemplary individuals to deliver the specific content and curriculum that I had developed for orientation. And so some of that is delivered by me, but a vast majority is delivered by their peers, because we know that it legitimizes the content, but also expands their network and their connections to key resources. And so as much as I'm able to bring those individuals in, that's really my primary mechanism of doing so. And I think the other part is really when we think about who are we using to deliver that content, as I think several of the other panelists have indicated, it's not just that onboarding content is not just at orientation, and it's not just delivered through, training, speaking sessions. It's, through their mentor, it's through their regional program leader, it's through their supervisor, office manager, et cetera. And so it's really important that we coordinate all of those actual roles in our onboarding experience to really thinking about that curriculum from a learning perspective, and thinking about, okay, so all these people who are really delivering this orientation content, whether they think so or not, do they understand how learning occurs? Do they understand, did I explain it like a file folder concept, that the first time an employee hears about reporting or whatever it is, they maybe create a file that says, oh, reporting is important in my job, right? And the next time but they didn't hear maybe anything else you said about it. And the next time you train on it, maybe they put a paper in there with a heading on it that says another part of that. And the next time we hear about it, actually words start to fill on that page. And so I think really helping every role that is involved in this, recognizing that they are delivering content and how to deliver that content well is really important. So it wasn't just about bringing those peers in, but recognizing, how am I training those people who really are in onboarding as well to do so with intentionality, and really understanding, again, how we learn as individuals, right? That they're not going to get it the first time. So don't just think, Angie's going to talk about it, so I don't have to talk about it anymore. That an employee often needs this content delivered multiple times before it ever really sinks in, and they can actually adopt that as a part of their practice. So I think that it's both, like I said, bringing their peers to speak, but also really deputizing more people to really think of themselves as also a trainer, a teacher of that material as well.
Amanda, and then Christy.
Yeah. So that is the really tricky part, is who is going to teach what different part and different piece, because there are so many moving parts, so many moving pieces, things change all the time. So luckily we have, a really good handful of people that are our subject matter experts that we can use to help teach those specific content areas. And we start out week one with Real Colors that I lead, and kind of, get everyone together, get everyone to know each other. And then we have, state level learning and org development, go over needs assessment, evaluation, reporting, that kind of stuff. When it comes to like relationship building in the community, we have, one of their peers talk about stuff like that. And they really have that county level perspective and can really help them see that in their own situation, in their own county. And so, yeah, we just use a good variety of people. We have administration do some of the recordings that we have on our asynchronous modules. We have our diversity, equity, and inclusion folks involved. We have a lot of other different supplemental units. So we have just a good mix of people. So that'll also, again, like Tierney said, expose them to a bigger network of people that they can get connected to and feel comfortable reaching out to later.
We also have a variety of people who deliver the programs. We try to balance it between theory and practice, and hearing from kind of the bigger picture and your peers that are kind of in the weeds with you. So we'll, like Amanda, I also do real colors during our training. So all of our new agents are all having that shared language, and when they are talking to their mentors and other people in the organization, they can kind of connect with that shared language and understanding each other. But we have evaluation specialists, leadership specialists in our content area trainings. Those are mostly specialists that are leading those. Our district directors, director of county operations, and our district program development coordinators for each program area all take part in help in leading different parts of our trainings. So when I'm looking at the structure of any one of our sessions, I'm trying to balance between hearing about some theory or from an HR director point of view, for example, on something, but then hearing the next session after that is going to have something from their peers that are agents in the field with them. So, and we try to make things as experiential as possible. So they have to do a county funds policy as an asynchronous training. When we have them in the room, we make them stand up and move to the left of the room or the right of the room for true or false on a couple of questions. Then we talk about why. Why does this question matter? How does this connect to your job? And giving some of that context behind some of those asynchronous things that we do, and giving them a lot of scenarios and things like that, and getting to see, here's actual marketing material from a county. You've learned about the theories around it. Now, like, here's what some actually look like, or getting to have some peer edits of a flyer or some different things that you're doing along the way. And so we try to just kind of go back and forth between it all. We really want to make sure that they understand that for most things, there's not just one way that things work, that every county is so different, every situation is so different. And so that they can see that there's lots of different ways to get at some things. And that if they are just hearing from a large urban county, we want to make sure the small rural counties are also represented so they can see, because not everything can be scaled up or down, but you have to kind of work things differently. And so we try to help them understand that for their own county and how to translate what they need to learn, but also to understand the complexity of the work that they're in our organization, and why we can't just have one nicely packaged thing sometimes, right? Because of that complexity across the state. So just helping them kind of understand that context as well.
Yes, very much so. That is so true. So Tierney, you mentioned earlier in one of your comments that you had to get buy-in in order to develop the next piece of, onboarding for support staff, for example. So how do you go about, or how did you go about getting buy-in to develop from scratch, Amanda, your onboarding program, or to revamp Tierney? Christy, you've had an existing program for a long time. So how do you convince administrators that this is a critical part of Extension's purpose, is to equip new employees? Let's start with Tierney.
Sure. Well, I have to acknowledge first that I kind of came in a unique and very advantageous situation, in that the year before I began, the strategic plan was focusing on that. We had an employee development committee that was very diverse with all sorts of voices. It was really strong. That really provided me sort of, this very insightful, robust illustration of, here are the challenges we're facing. Here's what's most important for you to address. And I came in on day one and was able to run with sort of this validation of, these things are important to all of these individuals at all levels. And that really, I think, validated a lot of the things that I was doing. And I think the sense of urgency is sometimes you have to be able to articulate that and point that out, but that was really evident when I started. So that was an easy element to already have in there. And then that buy-in. So you need those two things, I think, to really create change. And those two things were present from day one, which made my work much easier. But I definitely feel like that need to strike while the iron is hot right now, and why support is high. So I think, though, in general, across the board, all of us have that sense of urgency we can tap into, because I think you can point to this great resignation, really, or whatever. It's really created a wake-up call. And if they're not woken up about this, hopefully you can do that there is a visible need, right, across the board for organizations to really prepare for this influx of new hires, really. And that creating that great employee experience really starts with onboarding and orientation. And so, really helping them to see that employees want to see a seamless, efficient, and really memorable onboarding experience. And so, the way I think, creating and getting buy-in works is really more of a grassroots approach is the way I like to go about things. So really getting involvement and ownership of ideas from multiple levels, allowing yourself to be responsive to the issues and the concerns that they're bringing up, and seeing it from different nuances and perspectives to really see it from a broad perspective of what is that problem and really understanding it. And then I think it's also, recognizing that's sometimes different from what I see as needs or things on the horizons. And so I think it's about first earning people's trust and giving them the small wins and the wins that they think are important, that are good, right? So obviously don't give them wins that are bad for an agency, but and then I think it's then hopefully developing that sense of I'm working for you. I am running hard for this agency, and you can trust me when I say I see these things on the horizon, right? This is what we need to be working towards. When you develop those relationships and that trusted voice, in that way, you can have more of a buy-in and create that urgency. And so right now, there's a lot of things like y'all brought up the manager. Man, that's my baby project. I can't wait till maybe they can give me this sort of move forward, because that's the thing that I feel like most impacts employee experiences is the manager. And so those are recruitment issues, so many different things, diversity training, there's hiring processes, all these things that you see that are urgent. And so it's planting those seeds and then finding your champion, right? Like who is going to be your champion in those things, to voice that even for you in other rooms. And so it's a hard thing, especially when I think for me, I care so much about these employees. I have a laundry list of things I want to do, right? So I have to be really strategic of what can I have buy-in from right now, and what will maybe get me buy-in for that next thing that is really important, and how am I constantly seeing myself as an advocate for the employees. And so even things that are not necessarily within my realm of control, right? Am I being a voice about benefits issues, right? Even if that's not a decision that I make, I know it affects those things. And so I think it's just really important that you're in those rooms, that you're voicing in those ways, and that you're building strong relationships with people. And it goes back to basic change management principles. So, but I think for me, I'm all about timing, communication, and then finding your champions.
Sorry, Christy.
No problem. Well, I agree with everything Tierney said, and I think the only piece that I can add is that I make sure that I have data to back it up, and that I'm hearing from all the different levels that this is needed, or understanding which levels of the organization are saying it's needed, and if there are other ones that might be more resistant to change. And then pulling together a committee that has representation. So when we had to we revamped the mentor program, it was our agents, our districts, that were both saying, hey, this isn't working for us. We need to do some things differently. We don't have enough urban fax agents to mentor all of our new urban fax agents. What do we do, for example? And pulling together that committee that had some specialists that had a mentor background, that you had some agents that had been mentors, that had been mentored on there, along with somebody, our program development coordinator. So having people at the different levels of the organization on that committee to make those decisions is really helpful. Having data to back things up. I know some people, that is their love language, and you've got to have it for them. And other people need the anecdotes and those more on that relationship and on that personal level. So having a little bit of both along the way, and then having the check-ins along. So piloting and then having evaluations, seeing how the process, what do we need to tweak so that they know that that this is really thought through and strategic in the change.
Yeah, so everything Tierney said and Christy said, it's about finding those champions to really tell those stories and build the relationships to help get buy-in. From administration, it was basically an ask, it was a need, it was, this is urgent, make this happen, with both our onboarding and our mentoring program. And along with what Christy said too, it's that hard data. So we're showing that we're getting that feedback after every series. We did focus groups, we did Qualtrics evaluations, we have the quantitative, we have the qualitative. And I think what really matters too is that people feel heard with their feedback and the changes that we're making. So with each change that we make, we are very clear and communicate, why this change was made. This was a direct result of the feedback that we received. This session was too long, or, we heard that this topic was less relevant at this time, or, should have been done this way. If there's something loud and clear, we'll definitely make those changes. But that original buy-in was not needed at all. It was just like, yes, this is an absolute need, run with it. So, and similar to what Christy said too, we had our planning committee with both our mentor program and our onboarding program that was inclusive of all our different program areas, different levels, different experiences, just to get sort of a diverse group of people in the room to put together both the mentor and onboarding trainings for our staff.
Okay, so you all just answered somewhat the question that I was going to pose next. So I'm going to move to the last question. So we have about 10 minutes left. If you have questions that you would like to pose to any of our panelists, you can open the Q&A and pose those there. If there's a specific person you want to direct the question to, please put their name in the question. If it's for everyone, you can just pose that question. So feel free to be posting those there now as we go to the last question. So the last question is really open-ended for all of you, is what's on the horizon for the next year to 3 years as you think about your work and where you're headed next with onboarding, mentoring, all of those pieces. Amanda.
Okay. Thought I'd just jump in and start. On the immediate horizon, we have reformatted our one extension onboarding to be back in person. When we had originally planned it, it was planned to be in person, then we had to go home, virtualize the whole thing. So this will be our first series of blended in-person lessons, asynchronous lessons, and virtual. So we're interested to see how that goes. Hopefully it'll really help with that relationship building. So we'll, again, get feedback and see how it goes. And then the other big thing is our new supervisor training that we'll be putting together. So we're kind of in the early stages of that, putting all the research together, the literature on that. So that's a big piece that we hope to have ready before the end of the year would be lovely, but we'll see how that goes. But that'll be rolled out to everyone in the organization. And so that will be a really big thing, I think, for us to get that done and have a solid supervisor training, mentor training, and onboarding that all flow together, that flow with the program area onboardings and orientations. Will be just a really solid flow of, getting people started in their first 18 months. So to have it all working together will be fun.
Christy.
On our horizon, we are working on a supervisor training. So we have our county coordinators training, but we know there's a lot of people out there that are supervisors that are not county coordinators. So we are looking at how to do that best. And our university has come out with some staff competencies and trainings around that. So looking at ways to incorporate what's available at the university versus what we're doing with an extension, how to make that more seamless and connected. And then we're constantly trying to add in and tweak and provide our DEI more so into onboarding along the way, as well as with it integrating into the rest of our organization and ongoing trainings. But I'm constantly looking at how and where can I incorporate more DEI into what we do.
I would say for us, really revitalizing our mentoring program and launching our coaching and peer program. Those are things that we're in the midst of doing right now. As I mentioned before, we really hope to launch a leadership program where it's not just the managers, but also the people that are hoping to be managers or supervisors, and then also a higher level. So really that idea of leading self, leading others, leading the organization, so that it is really more of a pathway track throughout. I think it's also for, me and I think Christy mentioned it, and I know Amanda has mentioned it at different points when we've talked, is really finding ways that we can make DEI at the center. I was excited to hear yesterday in the session, the affinity groups, because that was something I was been really excited about. And I was like, oh man, I want to use this to leverage, like, this is where we're doing it at other places. And so those are just things that I'm excited about doing. But I think it's also important that we're continuing to build our internal capacity and look at ways that we can help to upskill or reskill our agents so that they see that career growth opportunity. And then I think it's also something that I see on the horizon is we're noticing, sometimes some of that competency gap that can be that can occur. And so more than just an orientation and onboarding, that might be more intensive that's needed as we see some of our collegiate programs turning out employees that maybe have significant gaps that we are expecting them to have. How do we address that? And so that's something we're looking at. And then I think it's also just continuing to build a culture of care and collectedness in our decision making and the experiences that we're creating. Because I think that really matters. And so that's just something that I hope to continue to be a voice about, because I think it's important.
Okay, so we have a few questions in the chat. Let's go for trying to answer as many of these as we can. So how difficult is it for you to balance your onboarding with what your university required asynchronous training? How are you communicating out with employees to help them to know what they really need to do? Christy, you have a response?
Sure. I will say right now they are parallel processes that are pretty separate as far as you're getting your emails from the university about what's required, and then you're getting the emails from Extension of what is required. On top of, I'm assuming that in some of their counties, they're probably from the county side of things also getting some onboarding requests that way. We are working to streamline that. Right now, our system where we sign all of our employees up for our internal trainings is a homegrown system. And so we are looking at the university system for internal trainings and trying to incorporate that together. So at that point, they would have one dashboard that would have all of their onboarding trainings on it. So we're in the, we had to let them kind of get up and running with this new system first across the university before we saw if it was a good fit for us. So we're in communication about that now, but we're hopeful to move that way, and it would be a much more streamlined approach.
Either of the others?
We have all of ours housed on one training process, but I would say we share with them exactly what to expect. Here's what the university required trainings are, here's ours, and here's some of the other things you might be needing to do at different points, so it's real clear to them. But what I would like to work at doing is where it's not the impact of the timing, but that's hard to do. So we have a known entity of what the university expects. So then how do we move some of the other pieces that we have some authority and control over? Because when you start and you have that many online trainings to do at once, it is a real negative experience. And so I can't really change the part that the university has, but how do we change some of these ones that are non-compliance related to be paced at a reasonable way and digestible way as well?
Anything to add, Amanda?
Unfortunately, we're not able to integrate our extension onboarding with the university one. It would be so wonderful if we could, but that would be like a dream someday to get it all together in one place from one person. So I think just the nature of different orientations coming from different people that they don't know, they're definitely bound to get confused. But between us and the supervisors, we try to, keep them straight that this is your OSU orientation. This is your extension, one extension onboarding experience. So we try to be very clear about it, but it's definitely a lot to try and learn and know when you're new.
So real quickly, one last question. How do you work on follow-ups you get from individual participants after the trainings or workshops? Do you work one-on-one, small group discussions on Zoom?
I can take that one first. So after our first and second cohorts of rolling out this program, we held focus groups with those individuals. We had, sent out the formal evaluation and then got a lot of that individual, unsolicited feedback later. So we held individual focus groups and group focus groups to help us really get kind of a sense of the bigger picture. And a lot of it was not necessarily onboarding orientation stuff. It was overall like much bigger picture items. So that was really, I think, helpful to do those focus groups. And we still kind of always get that feedback, but it was really nice to get kind of a different picture that way by doing the focus groups.
We just did our 5-year study of looking at our foundations trainings and if it was on time and getting the content that they needed.
Okay. Any last comment, Tierney?
I was going to say, I think I misunderstood the question. I thought it was like, how do you deal when they're reaching out to you with continued questions or things like that? And so I may have misheard the question. So
we'll have all those questions. We've got one more in the queue, but we'll ask you guys to answer those questions. The last question we're related to, can you share your big picture plan, your metric, like your path picture, Christy, that you shared with me when I first came into this job. So if you have materials like that, kind of an outline of what you cover, we would be happy to post those on the website. Thank you all for sharing your information today. It was a pleasure to work with you, and I'll turn the program back over to Diane.
Okay, well, thank you again to all of our panelists. This is a topic that I have great interest in, so it's a great conversation. And I want to thank everybody for attending today's session. If you'd like to contact any of today's presenter, their contact information will be shared now in chat. We'll be sharing the recording on the NAEPSDP webinar archive page, along with some of those resources that Cheryl just mentioned. We'd also appreciate your feedback on today's session. There'll be a couple of ways that you can access the survey. You can either follow the link we'll be sharing in chat in just a minute, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code that'll be shown in our closing slides at the conclusion of our session. And to close, we want to invite you to join us for tomorrow's session with presenters from Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Extension Foundation for their session on strengthening Extension employees through capacity building. So as you can see, we're moving through the Extension career, and so tomorrow will be more mid-career. So how do we increase that? How do we build capacity in our employees? So you can visit the NAEPSDP website to register for any of these remaining sessions in our series. Thank you again to all of our panelists, our facilitator, and to everybody in attendance today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you all tomorrow.